Hi students, today we will see class 12 Sociology chapter 3 part 2. Here in this figure, Savitri Boy Blue 1831 to 1897. Savitri Boy Blue was the first headmistress of the country's first school for girls in Pune. She devoted her life to educating Sutras and Adi Sutras. She started a night school for agriculturists and laborers. She died while serving plague patients. Colonism and caste. Compared to the ancient past, we know a lot more about caste in our recent history. If the modern history is taken to begin with the 19th century, then Indian independence in 1947 offers a natural dividing line between the colonial period, roughly 150 years from around 1800 to 1947. That means 18 to 1947, the past independence or post-colonial period in bracket 7 decades from 1947 to the present day. The present form of caste as the social institution has been shaped very strongly by both the colonial period as well as the rapid changes that have come about in independent India. Scholars have agreed that all major social institutions, and especially the institution of caste, underwent major changes during the colonial period. In fact, some scholars argue that what we know today as a caste is more a product of colonism than of ancient Indian tradition. Not all of the changes brought about were intended or deliberate. Initially, the British administrators began by trying to understand the complexities of caste in an effort to learn how to govern the country efficiently. Some of these efforts took the shape of very methodical and intensive surveys and reports on the customs and manners of various tribes and castes all over the country. Many British administrative officials were also amateur ethologists and took great interest in pursuing such surveys and studies. But by far the most important official effort to collect the information and cost was through the census. First begun in the 1860s, the census began a regular 10-yearly exercise conducted by the British Indian government from 1881 onwards. The 1901 census, under the direction of Herbert Risley, was particularly important as it sought to collect the information on the social hierarchy of caste, that is, the social order of precedence in particular regions. In 1901, census under the direction of Herbert Risley was particularly important as it sought to collect information on the social hierarchy of caste, that is, the social order of precedence in particular regions, as to the position of each caste in the rank order. This effort had a huge impact on social perception of caste and hundreds of petitions were addressed to the census commissioner by representatives of different castes claiming a higher position in the social scale and offering historical and scriptural evidence for their claims. Overall, scholars feel that this kind of direct attempt to count caste and to officially record caste status changed the institution itself. Before this kind of intervention, caste identified had been much more fluid and less rigid. Once they began to be counted and recorded, caste began to take on a new life. Other interventions by the colonial state also had an impact on the institution. The land revenue settlements and the related arrangements and laws served to give the legal recognition to the customary caste-based rights of the upper caste. These castes now became landowners in the modern sense rather than feudal classes with claims on the produce of the land or claims to revenue or tribute of various kinds. Large-scale irrigation schemes like ones in the Punjab were accompanied by the efforts to settle populations there, and these also had a caste dimension. At the other end of the scale, towards the end of the colonial period, the administration also took an interest in the welfare of downtrodden castes, referred to as the depressed classes at that time. It was as part of these efforts that the Government of India Act of 1935 was passed, which gave the legal recognition to the lists or schedules of castes and tribes marked out were for special treatment by the state. This is how the term scheduled tribes and the scheduled caste came into being. Castes at the bottom of the hierarchy that suffered severe discrimination, including all the so-called untouchable castes, were included among the scheduled castes. In bracket, you will read more on untouchability and the struggle against it in chapter 5 on social exclusion. Thus, colonialism brought about the major changes in the institution of caste. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that the institution of caste underwent fundamental changes during the colonial period. Not just India, but the whole world was undergoing rapid change during this period due to the spread of capitalism and modernity. Here they give Periyar in bracket E.V. Ramasamy Nayakar 1879 to 1973. Periyar E.V. Ramasamy Nayakar is known as the Nationalist and the leader of the lower caste movement in South India. He aroused people to realize that all men are equal and that it is the birthright of every individual to enjoy liberty and equality. Caste in the present. Indian independence in 1947 marked a big but ultimately only the partial break with the colonial past. Caste considerations have inevitably played a role in the mass mobilizations of the nationalist movement. Efforts to recognize the depressed classes and particularly the untouchable castes predated the nationalist movement, having begun in the second half of the 19th century. This was an initiative taken from both the ends of the caste spectrum by upper caste progressive reformers as well as by the members of the lower castes such as Mahatma Jyotiba Phule and the Baba Sahib Ambedkar in Western India, Ayyangali, Sri Narayana Guru, Ayodhidas and Periyar E.V. Ramasamy Nayakar in the south. Both Mahatma Gandhi and Baba Sahib Ambedkar began organizing protest against the untouchability from the 1920s onwards. Anti-untouchability programs became a significant part of the Congress agenda, so that by the time independence was on the horizon, there was a broad argument across the spectrum of the nationalist movement to abolish caste distinctions. The dominant view in the nationalist movement was to treat caste as a social evil and as a colonial ploy to divide Indians. But the nationalist leaders, above all Mahatma Gandhi, were able to simultaneously work for the upliftment of the upper castes, advocate the abolitions of untouchability and other caste restrictions, and at the same time reassured the land-owning upper castes that their interests too would be looked after. The post-independence Indian state integrated and reflected these contradictions. On the one end, the state was committed to the abolition of caste and explicitly wrote this into the constitution. On the other hand, the state was both unable and unwilling to push through the radical reforms which would have undermined the economical basis for the caste inequality. At yet another level, the state assumed that if it operated in a caste-blind manner, this would automatically lead to the undermining of caste-based privileges and eventual abolitions of the institution. For example, appointments to the government jobs took no account of caste, thus leaving the well-educated upper castes and the ill-educated or often illiterate lower castes to compete on equal terms. The only exception to this was in the form of reservation for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. In other words, in the decades immediately after independence, the state did not make sufficient effort to deal with the fact that the upper castes and the lower castes were far from equal in economic and educational terms. The development activity of the state and the growth of the private industry also affected caste indirectly through the spreading up and intensification of the economic change. Modern industry created all kinds of new jobs for which there were no caste rules. Urbanization and the conditions of collective living in the cities made it difficult for the caste segregated patterns of the social interaction to survive. At a different level, modern educated Indians attracted to the liberal ideas of individualism and meritocracy began to abandon the more extreme caste practices. On the other hand, it was remarkable how resilient caste proved to be. Recruitment to the industrial jobs were in the textile mills of Mumbai (then Bombay), the jute mills of Kolkata (then Calcutta), or elsewhere, continued to be organized along caste and kinship-based lines. The middlemen who recruited labor for the factories tended to recruit them from their own caste and region, so that particular departments or shop floors were often dominated by specific castes. Prejudice against the untouchables remained quite strong and was not absent from the cities, though not as extreme as it could be in the village. Here they give Sri Narayana Guru 1856 to 1928. Sri Narayana Guru, born in Kerala, preached brotherhood for all and fought against the ill efforts of the caste system. He led a quiet but significant social revolution and gave the watchwords one caste, one religion, one God for all men. Not surprisingly, it was in the cultural and domestic spheres that caste has proved strongest. Endogamy, or the practices of marrying within the caste, remained largely unaffected by modernization and change. Even today, most marriages takes place within the caste boundaries, although there are more intercaste marriages, while some boundaries may have become more flexible or porous. The borders between the groups of caste of similar socio-economic status are still heavily patrolled. For example, intercaste marriages within the upper castes, bracket example Brahmin, Banya, Rajput, may be more likely now than before, but marriages between an upper caste and backward or scheduled caste person remain rare even today. Something similar may have occurred with the regard to rules of food sharing. Perhaps the most eventful and important sphere of change has been that of politics. From its very beginnings in independent India, democratic politics has been deeply conditioned by caste. While its functioning has become more and more complex and hard to predict, it cannot be denied that caste remains central to electoral politics. Since the 1918, we have also seen the emergence of explicitly caste-based political parties. In the early general elections, it seemed as though caste solitaries were decisive in winning elections, but the situation soon got very complicated as the parties competed with each other in utilizing the same kind of caste calculus. Sociologists and social anthropologists coined many new concepts to try and understand these processes of change. Perhaps the most common of these are Sanskritization and dominant caste, both contributed by M.N. Srinivas, but discussed extensively and criticized by other scholars. Sanskritization refers to the process whereby the members of a bracket, usually middle or lower caste, attempt to raise their own social status by adopting the ritual and domestic and social practices of a caste in bracket or castes of higher status. Although this phenomenon is an old one and predates independence and perhaps even the colonial period, It has intensified in recent times. The patterns of emulation chosen most often were the Brahmin or Kshatriya caste. Practices included adopting the vegetarianism, wearing of caste thread, performance of specific prayers and religious ceremonies, and so on. Sanskritization usually accompanies or follows a rise in economic status of the caste attempting it, though it may also occur independently. Subsequently, research has led to many modifications and revisions being suggested for this concept. These include the argument that Sanskritization may be a defiant clamping of previously prohibited rituals or social privileges in brackets such as wearing of the sacred thread, which used to invite severe punishment, rather than a flattering imitation of the upper castes by the lower castes. Thank you. Sharing is caring. Comment your thoughts. Subscribe for more knowledge.